So, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to yet another video here on the Freak Flyers YouTube channel. And today we're going to be doing part 2 of our skydiving hacks with 10 more hacks that will help your skydiving career a little bit. So without further ado, let's get started. Number 1, we have fly a predictable pattern. This isn't so much a hack as it is more of a life tip, because this will help you preserve your life. What do I mean when I say flying a predictable pattern? This will depend on the drop zone you're jumping at and the rules on the landing. Some drop zones, you can land any direction you want because the landing area is a big square of grass, and usually the landing direction is either defined by an arrow on the ground when the winds can change more than 45 degrees in the time that it takes for everybody to land. This will prevent, a person who sees the windsock as they're on their final and they decide, okay, this is my landing direction, and then maybe some other person will turn a little bit as they're doing their final to keep up with the wind because they can see the windsock. If these two people meet at the same time on the landing, the one that follows the final straight and predictably, and the person who adjusts themselves on the final, this can cause some trouble. Some drop zones put arrows on the ground so that whatever direction the arrow is the direction you're going to land, and even if the wind changes, that's still going to be the direction you're going to land. At my drop zone, for instance, there's only, on the main landing area that is, there's only 2 landing directions. It's going to be north or south, regardless of the wind. If you have enough experience to land on the main landing area, you'll have to follow the wind direction. So if the wind is, regardless if it's coming from southeast, southwest, or south, you're landing towards south. And if the wind is coming, regardless if it's from north, northwest, or northeast, you're going to have to land towards north. And if you can't follow, then you're going to have to go on to the student landing area if you can't land with slightly crosswind, that is. Why is it important to fly a predictable pattern? Well, first, it's good that you're not flying a super crazy into the wind, whatever pattern that's not following the local rules. Not only to protect you from not getting hit by a canopy, but also to protect your friends, because if you're doing a crosswind landing and everybody's landing straight, you're pushing them off of the landing area if they're avoiding you, and they're either going to land on the fence, or if they don't want to land on the fence, they're going to land into you. And if you have a parachute colliding in your trailing edge, it's going to deflate your parachute, and you're basically going to have it stalling over your head. A little bit of a different stall, but it's still going to be kind of a stall. So yeah, avoid that at all costs. Number 2, we have tuck in your shoelaces. It is not going to be the first time, nor will it be the last time, that I am doing a camera flying jump. I'm sit flying, and I am being complete and utterly bombarded with my shoelaces on my shins. The tips of the shoelaces usually are a little bit more rigid. They have that plastic thing, and when it's shaking around, it does like a whipping effect, and it whips you on your shins, and it hurts a lot. It can be enough for you to have to kind of look down at your foot and you see you're getting slapped. And for those of you who don't work in the sport, it can mean that your video is not going to look good, or you're going to look distracted. If you do work in the sport and you're a videographer like me, the pain on your shins, you're going to look away from the passenger, you're going to look into your shins, and just that can kind of ruin the video. And if your boss is just walking down the video aisle as you're showing it to the client and sees that crazy movement, they might not be happy. And the client, of course, not going to like it as well. So it's something that you can avoid. Tuck in your shoelaces. A second part of this trick is what I've done with my shoes, but this works because they're very loose fitting sneakers, is I've put the shoelaces on backwards. So the part that you tie is on the bottom, and they're permanently fixed size. Mostly because I don't need to untie my shoes to remove them, most of them at least. So I just put them backwards. That way they're never flapping around, because I've done a permanent knot that is tucked away. So there's the tip for that. Tip number 3 will be careful on solo jumps. You'll always learn more on a two-way belly than a free fly solo, with an asterisk, this one. So we've all lived this. If you're experienced, you've lived this, and if you're not experienced, maybe you've been the one causing this issue, which is you're on the loading area. Everybody's getting organized. People are deciding when they're going to jump, and you have some people who get asked, "What are you going to do on this load?" And I'm going to sit fly. or I'm going to do head down, solo. And you look at them, you're like, okay, clearly this dude has 70 jumps or 50 jumps, whatever. He is not in any position to do any sort of good sit flying, static sit flying without moving, or head down for that matter. So if you are in that situation where you're the person doing a random solo jump, maybe avoid it. You're going to learn a lot more by doing like a two-way belly with someone you just randomly meet in the loading area. And you both are alone, yeah, let's do a two-way, or maybe even a three-way if you find a two-way that is willing to join you. Even, going, if you use the camera on 200 jumps and you're not free-flying yet on 200 jumps, which is common if you've been doing only belly flying in big ways and you're just going to, you have a camera but you don't free-fly yet and you're going to learn to free-fly, it's better to just go and film a group, if they let you, rather than going to do a solo jump. And here's why. You're going to have a lot of movement side to side, usually backwards, regardless if it's a head down or head up. You're going to have backwards movement because your body's going to try to feel air on the front part. So on your chest, on your arms, on the front part of your legs, on your belly, because you're used to belly flying and your body is always going to feel more comfortable because it's always closer to belly flying if you're going backwards. So if your chest is presented to the wind, regardless if you're head down or head up, you're still going to be going backwards. Because it's just normal. It's just natural for our bodies to want to recognize that type of airflow. And so it's very common for people to move backwards a lot. The only situation where I do agree with people flying solo free fly is if they are doing homework jumps. When I'm doing a free fly course or an angle flying course, I teach my students and brief my students to do homework jumps. This is the jump where if you're going to go with the coach is only going to film you and you're likely going to repeat much of what you did on the last jump. So basically you're wasting a whole bunch of money, and us as sky coaches, we're so threatened by wind tunnel when it comes to making money coaching that we don't want to exploit our students. We don't want to be like, yeah, jump with me and do 100 jumps with me until you're a good free flyer. No, we want to do, at least a good coach wants to do a plan where the person is going to be doing some solo jumps during the moments in their progression where it's kind of similar for them to have a coach or not. So it's going to be good to have a coach with you because they can tell you exactly what you're doing wrong and they can show you and demonstrate you on the video exactly the mistakes that you did. Whereas if you're just alone, you're basically repeating, and repetition does help you progress. And so what the instructor is going to do, he's going to explain to you exactly what you need to do on the jump and what you need to be careful of. So you're like, okay, what's the risk? The risk is going to start going backwards like a maniac. Simple. Focus a point that's perpendicular to the jump run. And if you're going to go backwards, you're doing like an angle flying. You're basically tracking. And if there's other angle flying groups on the load, you can even account for that. So you can look where they're going. So let's say there's like a factory that you use as a reference, or a house, or a road or something. You can look at that road, the road that the angle flyers are going towards. You look at it, then that means even if you're moving backwards, you're moving away from the direction that they're going. It's going to be hard for you to actually meet a group of angle flyers that are on purpose angle flying while you're set flying and going backwards. It's going to be a little bit hard for that to happen. But what can happen is if the group of angle flyers has a less experienced person whose brief was try to follow us, and if you can't stop and track backwards or stop and stay where you are, then that person can track a little bit and stop and stay above you while you're sit flying, and then it can cause some problems on the opening. You guys will probably meet, which won't be perfect. Hack number 4, put down your canopy and pick it up carefully. This hack, my friends, is probably one of the things that helped me the most to be a legitimately fast packer and to have relatively good openings, even though I have a lot of cutaways. So what do I mean by this? When you land, it's very common for like the canopy to go in front of you or over you or blah, blah, blah. Try to avoid this happening. Try to avoid the canopy falling in front of you or randomly, because it is going to help you tremendously to pick it up smoothly and to pack it smoothly. Now, what do I mean by this? When you put the canopy down, if you're putting it, like if it falls nose first, it's kind of inevitable. What I like to do is I try to pick it up as symmetrically as possible after putting my toggles. I don't do my toggles on the landing area simply because I don't want the canopy to be on the sun. I usually do them inside of the hangar with a harness still on my back. So even if the canopy falls in front of me, which is kind of rare, it's more common on tandems, I'd say, I pick it up and I rotate it so that the trailing edge is towards the bottom and the nose is towards the top. And then I put the canopy down so that the weight of the canopy basically compresses it and all of the air gets pushed through the nose, because the nose is, the cells are the openings. The nose is where the cells are open for the air to flow out. So if you try to compress the canopy and squash it down to pick it up with the nose facing down, it's basically the only openings for the air to leave are covered. You need to turn the canopy around, press it down, and you're going to see the canopy is going to deflate much easier, especially if it's an older canopy. Newer canopies tend to behave like whatever they want anyways. The second thing is, if you pick it up symmetrically, if you shake it up while you're picking it up, if you shake it, you create this like flower shape where the cells are pointed up and the tail is on the bottom, and then you push it down. When you put the canopy down like this, as you're running up the lines to pack it, it's going to be basically flaked already, because the canopy is going to want to kind of assume that shape anyways. What we're doing when we're packing the canopy is we're putting all the lines in the center and all of the fabric around it so that the nose inflates first, the lines stay stretched in the center so that there's no line overs and there's no possibility of tension outs because of the lines being misrouted and out of tension and slapping against each other. And the nose is nice and exposed. And if you look, this is exactly what the canopy looks like if you pick it up like I'm explaining. The tail is hidden in the bottom, and the nose is nice and open and exposed in the front, and all of the lines are in the center. This is basically a pack job done, and all you need to do, put it on the ground, flake it like you do, and then close it up when you're doing your pro pack. Another good tip that I can guarantee you guys will help you a lot, not looking like a beginner and also packing like a pro. So on the last video, I said you should pay a beer to your instructors just to strike up a conversation and learn something from them. And this is true, and I kind of went into it very deeply, and it kind of overlaps with this next hack, but it's a little bit different, which is strike up a conversation with the locals at your drop zone bar. This is because people that are locals know a lot more about the drop zone than you do. They might know the best times of year to come. They might know when there's X amount of tandems or X amount of events happening where fun jumpers are limited to jump. And they might even know things that are fun to do in the city while you're in a drop zone. And all of this can help in situations where you can make a mistake. This has personally happened to me where I go to a drop zone with a goal of jumping for X amount of days, and I kind of do not a lot of planning. And I get to the drop zone and it's like bad weather all week and nobody's there. And I'm like, wait, why is this? And I text a friend who jumps there and like, yo, bro, you should have asked me, because this week it's been known for a long time that there's a storm. It's even on our local news that there's a storm, and we all came. We got a van together and we drove for 1.5 hours to base jump off of a super cool object where the weather isn't so bad. Like, I know this is kind of a long shot, but this can happen, and it has happened similar things to me where you're alone and you plan on having fun in the weekend, and maybe everybody that you were expecting to see on that weekend is not even there. So this is what I mean. After the day of jumping, strike up a conversation. Try to get to know the locals, because they can inform you of rules, events, and special ins and outs of the drop zone that you don't know. Sixth tip is double guide ring, or if you want, upper single guide ring. What do I mean by this? It might sound confusing. When you buy your container, your canopy, when it's set up, usually you have the control lines, or the toggle lines, I'll call it control lines, and the lower portion gets threaded through the little guide ring on the rear riser. Then you insert the toggle, boom, you're done. Easy. There's a little bit of a better way to do this, especially if you fly with rear risers actively. So if you're swooping or you're thinking about swooping, which is, have you ever noticed that when you're going to grab your rear risers, the toggles can stay kind of sideways instead of following the movement of your hand? And then as you're trying to grab onto the riser solidly, the toggle is on the way. Like, you're trying to grab, and the rigid nose of the toggle basically gets on the way of you grabbing the riser. Now you're like, okay, this is like extremely nitpicky. Why would anybody be worried about this? Well, it's not a real worry when you're just practicing grabbing the risers and you're having fun and you want to come back from a long spot where you have some seconds to do this. But if we're talking about a recovery arc of a canopy, let's say it's a 2-second recovery arc of a little bit of a bigger canopy. If you're grabbing and you're finding the toggle in your hand instead of the rear riser on one side only, not one of the sides is okay, the other side is not okay, and this will be, let's say, a 0.5 second delay. or 0.5 second like mistake. That's 25% of the recovery arc. And during the recovery arc, you're already doing multiple different inputs. Whether you think about it or not, there's subconscious little inputs that you're doing. Like you're grabbing, you're feeling for the tension, you're looking at the ground, your brain is processing the visual image of the ground coming to you. There's a whole million different things that are being processed by your brain. And then, boom, all of a sudden, 25% of that moment of ultra attention gets distracted by a stupid toggle. This has happened to me because literally it's been the opposite, where all of my life I've seen people use the upper guide ring on the soft link, and I've just used it without even thinking about it. My mentor had it on his Canopy. He even had a physical piece of webbing with a guide ring attached on top of the riser, on the upper part of the riser. And so I always saw that, and I thought, yeah, why does he use that? I didn't even think, why does he use that? I thought, why doesn't he just install it on the soft link, which is like how I do it? So I never thought about that. And then one day, as I was swooping with the risers that don't have the upper guide ring, that happened to me. I was grabbing and it felt weird because I was grabbing the toggle sideways, the nose of the toggle that is, and it was affecting the way I was swooping. And so I started using that. In the beginning, I actually used guide rings with a small extension because there was I didn't have any guide rings available. I only had old rapid links from Parachute de France, and they have like a 1 or 2 inch long, almost 1.5 inch long. That will be like, what, 6 centimeters, a little less. No, 2 inches, like 5 centimeters is 2 inches. That will be like 3.5 centimeters of line attached to it. And my thought was, this is good because it's like creating a little bit of a wider arc that my lines go, that my control lines go, so it's going to control the canopy a little bit better. In reality, it doesn't make a difference, like in my opinion. In terms of performance, that is, if you touch it lower, upper, or with an extension, maybe it makes a difference in classic accuracy canopies because I've seen it used on that. But on high performance canopies, it's just so small. It doesn't make a difference, in my opinion. Okay, maybe some ninja notices a difference that I don't. And so this helps a lot with the way you grab and the way it feels when you're grabbing. And it's one less thing that can, basically get messed up as you're landing. Now, the second tip actually is more for people that do maybe XRW or that just want to prevent a kind of an emergency happening. So this is the double guide ring system. So you have your upper guide ring and you have your lower guide ring, which will be empty if you transfer the where the toggle gets guided through to the top ring. Here's the thing, guys. If you do this, if you transfer the guide ring up, you need to stow your brakes differently. I'm not going to say how to stow it because I would have to go through it fast, but I think one of my videos kind of shows it, the packing video. Just go look for that. And before you change it, hopefully you're not disassembling. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the way the stowing point is going to be different, hopefully you're not disassembling soft links by yourself. Go to a rigger. If you really feel like you need to do this, which honestly maybe you don't, go to a rigger, ask them about this, show them this, and tell them what you want, and they'll change it for you, of course, and they'll also explain what you need to do to stow your brakes differently, because it's not the same way to stow your brakes. It's going to be different. Now, I use on some of my rigs double guide rings. Now, which rigs do I use these double guide rings? What's the benefit of having the top guide ring? Because when you have double guide rings, the benefits of the top guide ring basically get obliterated. They don't work anymore because you have the lower guide ring. So when do I do this? I do this in my Mutant, for instance, where I'm not grabbing on the top of the riser. I'm grabbing like halfway on the riser. I have little handles to grab onto, and that's where I grab. But now you ask me, why do you do this? Well, very, very simple. If you're letting go of your toggles, usually they point up, like they turn and they face up. I don't know if I have a video showing that, but maybe I can find one. What happens is, as they're turning and flapping around in the wind, and I've noticed that this is more common, and this has happened to me before with normal toggles, because they're very flat, like they're very flappy. They flap around everywhere. My toggles, they're all stitched, so they're rigid, and even though they look thinner, they're 2 layers of Type 4 webbing, so they are more rigid, and they don't flap around as much. But when toggles are flapping around, what can happen, and I've seen it happen, and it happened to me on XRW, is they can jump over in between the V that the control line creates against the rear risers, and it basically locks the toggle. So as you're pulling it, it's going to be locked. It's going to pull the whole rear riser instead of pulling the toggle. And this can be crappy, to say the least. I would think that in a super hardcore situation where you're doing an XRW and someone's going to crash into you, you just want to brake like real quick, I would see you braking with one toggle and the other one that got wrapped, you would full stall your canopy and go into helicopter. I never saw this happening, but I could see it happen. And when you're loading a canopy at 3.6, 3.8, and you're at 4,000 feet, which is when you separate an XRW, you're filming you're fine. You think, okay, I'm fine. I have a canopy open above my head, and I'm seeing the wingsuit track away and deploy. Wow, that's cool. And you're losing altitude. You're literally almost in free fall. 3,000 feet turns into 4,000 feet turns into 3,000 feet quick. And then you go to grab your toggles, you look up, you pull, and you feel something's weird, and you look, and you see it's all wrapped. Now you're going to have to let go of one toggle, unwrap the toggle, then grab both again. Hopefully the other toggle didn't get wrapped again. And once you look at it, you're maybe even landing off, or close to landing off, with a tiny canopy at 3.8. It's such an avoidable thing that it's just stupid not to do it. So what I do is, for jumps where I know I'm going to let go of my toggles, I like to put it through both of the guide rings, because then it basically, there's no way for it to thread through the guide ring. The control line, is pressed up against the rear riser because it's going through both guide rings. It's basically impossible for the toggle to fly through that tiny little minuscule gap. So when do I do this? The Mutant. Why do I do it on the Mutant? Because first of all, there's no real advantage to having the only one guide ring, because the line is straight anyways when you're grabbing lower, so might as well go through the guide ring, the upper and lower guide rings. There's absolutely no difference. And in case you have a cutaway on a competition jump, let's say the first jump you had a malfunction, or you even cut away, and you used one of your rejumps. So you only have one rejump if it's a problem with your gear. And this was like the first jump of the comp, and you're like, okay, I'm basically screwed. Like, literally anything, even a 90 into the course will be better than a 0, because you'll get a 0, you will not get a rejump. So what happened to me on the IPC, and this is why I started thinking more about this, is I had my first jump was a rejump because I had tension knots. I unstowed the toggles. I saw the tension knots. I was quite high, but then I couldn't let go of the toggles because I was scared they would get wrapped. And call me a little bitch, but I was scared they would get wrapped. And so I had to land with a RDS assembled. I was kind of low, so I just landed like that. Now, if I had the double guide ring, yes, would I still solve it and go through the course? Probably. Like, if I was fast enough to solve, I would be super comfortable. I wouldn't even think about it. I would just let go of the toggles, remove the slider, put a slider in my pocket, and then continue with my jump. Because I didn't have the double guide ring, I was hesitating, and that little hesitation made me not want to do it. Like, I hesitated, I lost altitude, I didn't want to do it. If I had a double guide ring, things would have been different. Even if I still aborted the turn because I was low and I went below everybody, on the nether jump, I would, no questions asked, think, no, there's no way. I already solved the tension knot. I'm not going to risk, even if I only do like 1 360 for the course, I'm still going to do it. So I would let go of everything. I would have absolutely no fears in letting go of my toggles because I know they're going to be fine. Put my slider away, unclip whatever I have to unclip on the Mutant, and do my landing. This is why I did it. Also, on my freestyle rig, on my freestyle risers that I assembled on the freestyle Canopy, the JVX, I also have this little thing where it's going through both guide rings. And you're asking me now, okay, but isn't this going to do that little disadvantage where your hands get weird on the toggle? And the answer is, yes, it can do it, but I have modified toggles on my freestyle Canopy. They're much bigger. They're like CRW toggles. And this is so that when I'm grabbing them really quickly after a trick, they are super open. They have a low-on, I modify them myself. I put low-on cable, double low-on cable inside of the toggle, and has also double type 4 webbing. So it's a super rigid, stable, hardcore toggle that I trust 100% that it will not get wrapped around anything, and it will always be nice and erect presented to me when I need to grab them. So it's going to be a cost analysis. Is it really that bad? Are your toggles going to get wrapped around? Well, maybe not on a 150, maybe not even on a 90, but on a 59, it has happened. I've seen it happen, and it happened to me. I've seen it happen while I was wingsuiting, I noticed it. And there's no way of you telling the guy. You're just going to have to break off early for them to have more time to deal with the problem. I've never actually seen a cutaway because of this, but I've seen a cutaway because of a different toggle-related reason that was also a knot, but it had to do with the way the toggles were stowed and the way the person installed the toggles. But still, I'm sorry for being so long about this. It's just some absolutely little thing that can actually help you in a jump. Now, is it 7? 6? I don't know. Number 6, packing. Now, this little tip hack is for those of you who have had this happen to them. And I can tell you this has happened to me, not because of on my own rig, but when I borrowed rigs, which is if you're borrowing a rig with dive loops that are only type 17 webbing, they don't have any sort of reinforcement, they're not Louis loops, they're not whatever, they can be hard to grab. Hopefully I put some pictures of the difference between Louis loops and normal crappy dive loops, but they tend to be so massaged, especially if they've been used by someone who never even touches the rear risers, the front risers, sorry. The dive loops on the front risers start getting massaged. And because they're on the burble of the front riser, they don't even get flapped around. They just started getting more and more and more compressed until they're basically flat. And when you want to grab them to start the turn, you can't find it. Like you go to put your fingers in them and you can't find them. And this is absolutely annoying. It has happened to me a few times, and it always happens on borrowed rigs because you don't know the rig, and it's annoying. When I was younger, I used to put tape. I don't recommend it at all, getting tape anywhere near your rig unless it's, unless it's like a mutant or something. Yeah, but don't put tape on your rig. But what you can do to prevent this is, first of all, there's better risers in the market, but I don't always like risers that are very voluminous. They're a pain in the ass to assemble, especially if they have a lot of protection coating, like some specific colors of some specific manufacturers. You will notice that they're much more rigid, much thicker, and then assembling the soft links is a pain in the ass, and sometimes even putting down the slider is hard because there's so much volume. I like the risers to be a perfect thickness for my gyro rings, where they come down with some resistance, but they also don't come back up after you land, so that you can assemble the slider with the rings still pressed up against the risers. Now, when you're packing, as you're putting the canopy on the container, what you can do is, and as you're putting the risers on the little side flaps, what you can do is pull the dive loop up so that it's basically packed with it on the opposite direction that it naturally wants to fall into. So gravity makes things fall down. I think the front risers will naturally fold down. Fold them up, and this will create basically two things. One, it's going to force it to the opposite direction it's naturally being forced, so it's going to remove some of the memory that the fabric gains. And two, as the slider is coming down and you're pulling the rings down, you're actually messing the little set position, because if you always leave it set up, so set towards the opposite way it's supposed to, it's eventually going to start even creating memory in that direction. But because you're pulling the slider down, the dive loops are up, you pull it down, and you're basically shaking up the fabric, removing some of its memory, and it's going to be nice and rigid and erect, presented to you for you to finger it. You always want to finger things that are erect. What the fuck? Same thing goes for the toggles. Now, the toggles aren't so important, and especially if you depending on the type of canopy you have, or the type of rig that you're using, they're going to be pretty fine, easy to find. What I like to do is fold them up for two reasons. First, they get exposed and erect, like I said again, when you're pulling the risers down, the slider rings down, sorry. And two, also they get hidden away if you have really short risers. Sometimes they can peek a little bit out, and they get hidden away if you fold them up. The other good thing is, because they're so exposed, as everything is coming out, they're facing up and they want to face down, they're going to be super open, and if you need to put your hands in them and just mash on them real quick, it's going to be much easier. This, however, only works on certain type of toggles that have the lower attachment point, so the lower tuck tab, let's say. Some manufacturers use pins like UPT. Avalon, for instance, uses a tuck tab. If that's the case, it's not going to be so easy to do this. Like if you have a Javelin, which uses a very low tuck tab, Velocity, I think also from, I don't know the name of the manufacturer. So yeah, that's it. Put your toggles up, and also your risers, put them side to side, because now you have the bulk of the heavy stitching on the riser, on the front and rear risers. There's, double layered and with heavy stitching, plus the dive loops, plus the toggles. It adds up to a lot of volume. So to counteract this, you can put the risers side to side and not on top of each other. This will reduce some of the sideways volume, make for a neater pack job, and also less things rubbing against each other once the canopy is opening. Número 7. Keep an extra SD card in your helmet. Guys, it will not be the first nor the last time that I forget my SD card. Trust me, I forget my SD card more than... I've probably done more SD SD-less card jumps, like an idiot, than most people have jumps. This is saying bad things about me, because I'm an idiot, and what I do now is I have an SD card extra on my helmet. Now, I've been through multiple different iterations of spare SD cards on helmets, but what I've come to conclude is the following. I used to have an SD card adapter, so this micro SD to big SD card adapter taped to my helmet with the opening exposed. The air will never be enough to pull the SD card out and make it fly away, trust me. And if for some reason I clicked on the GoPro to record an imported jump and the GoPro didn't record, all I needed to do, without even taking the helmet off, was to remove the GoPro from the little box, get in front of me, and pop the SD card in. Now, 3D printing has made it possible for me to have a little tray that I suggested my 3D printing guy, Johnny Water, he's on Instagram, buy his stuff. He gave me a whole bunch of things because he's my friend. But I suggested him include this little tray. Now, what this little tray does is it includes 2 SD cards. Maybe you could have it for just one, because I usually use 2 cameras. It fits 2 SD cards. And what you do is you can slide it out, and there's 2 extra SD cards in there. And it's so easy to access, because usually when you're doing camera flying, you don't notice you forgot your SD cards right before you jump. You notice it as you're boarding, because you're using the camera during the flight. So I have more time to finagle this little tray out and be careful with it. Whereas with my old system, it was just like, oh fuck, I forgot. I would just pop it out of the little tape the SD card holder on my ear, like next to my ear. Now, the current version that I do is I have the extra SD cards on the little sliding tray, and because I only use one audible, yes, crucify me for only using one audible, I'm so irresponsible, blah, blah, blah. Now, on the little tray, I have the SD cards, and instead of having 2 audibles, on the space for the audible, I actually put a GoPro battery in, because it does kind of fit. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but if you're using your helmet enough and it's creating like memory to your head enough, it's actually not that bad. And I have an extra battery in there too. Just remember to change it once in a while. I rotate that battery, so once the battery is finished, I put that battery on the GoPro and then put another charge battery there, because if you just leave a battery there indefinitely, trust me, it will not work when you need it to. Tip number 9 for swoopers. For real swoopers, that is, for small canopy swoopers. I mean, everybody's a real swooper. Put the height of your emergency beep the same height that you start the turn to avoid it going off. This is meant for like extra high performance swoopers that you hear the audible emergency beep as you're. I'm not talking about as you're doing the turn, because as you're doing the turn, that's pretty normal. I'm talking as you're doing the pattern. Yes. If you're flying a Petra highly loaded, as you're banking, it creates so much speed that the audible will actually start ringing, and as it's ringing, you're not gonna hear the beeps for your pattern. I cannot tell you how many times this has messed up my pattern. Never in comp, but I've seen guys complaining after a run like, fuck, I couldn't do my turn properly, I couldn't do my setup properly because the beeper kept ringing as if it was an emergency. And the tip is put the emergency beeper the height of that you start to turn. My lowest turn starts at actually 1,200 feet, but I have it at 1,500 feet because the canopy that I use at 1,200 feet doesn't really have enough speed to ring the beeper. So I put it at 1,500 feet, and now you can tell me, but wait, what? Then the beeper is going to be super low. Well, honestly, if I pull my reserve at 1,500 feet, I'm still going to survive, you know? And second, I never in my life, even when I used the beeper at 2,500 feet, did I trust the emergency beeper to tell me when to cut away. All of my skydiving career, and hopefully in the future that's the same, I've seen a malfunction, I tried to solve it, and I know what height I pulled, I know more or less how high I am, and I tried to solve it, 1, 2, okay, I'm gonna cut away. And this is why I have a lot of cutaways. I don't mess with stupid emergencies that are kind of unfixable, even though most of them were. But, no, just didn't want to waste altitude. I'd rather open my reserve. I'd rather cut away, stabilize, provide nice, fluid, smooth, and fast airflow going through my body for my reserve to open smoothly and with good airflow instead of me cutting away last minute, pulling the reserve on my back, or rushing to pull my reserve. Or God forbid, my Cypress actually opens my reserve for me, and it's going to create a messed up opening rather than the smooth openings that I've always had on my reserve cutaways, where I chop early. I just say, fuck it, chop early, stabilize, pull my reserve, and I have a beautiful reserve opening over my head. I would much rather this than trusting your super low beeper to tell you when to cut away. And so this is a tip for you guys that might have been suffering from the emergency beeper going off. And final tip, this final tip is stupid. On a part 2 of a skydiving hacks video from a YouTuber that makes clearly not very beginner friendly content, more like middle advanced content, I'd say. I don't know. You guys, what do you guys think my content's for? But regardless, log your jumps carefully from the beginning. I am a freak when it comes to logging jumps. I log my jumps very carefully, and there's some tips that I would even love to have heard when I started logging my jumps. And this goes for base jumping, and it goes for skydiving, and if there's any other sport where logging is something common or even required, I would say also log it in there. And what do I mean by this? I'm going to tell you a small, very tiny little story. When I was a young kid, for the purposes of the story, let's say I was 16, because you need to be 16 to do a tandem in Portugal. I was in the plane, and there was a person who was more or less experienced. He was camera flying. He was going to film my jump, my tandem jump. And I asked if we could do a drogless jump, like without a drogue, Atmo tandem. If you guys know what Atmo tandem means, good. You're old school like me. Even though I'm not that old school. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. If you don't, ignore it. So I asked the tandem instructor, hey, can we do a drogless Atmo tandem? Obviously, because the tandem instructor follows the rules, he said no, and of course we didn't do it. We did a normal, completely legal, UPT-approved tandem. The person who was filming us, I said he can go on the back. Before, of course, the tandem instructor completely denied my request for a drogless tandem, because drogless tandems are forbidden. Don't do drogless tandems. You know what I mean. So I said, hey, he can go on the back. And the tandem instructor going with me, my mentor, Carlos Faustino, said he is not proficient enough flying to keep up with a tandem angle flying, even though we're not going to do the tandem angle flying. And I said, oh, bummer. And I'm like, but what kind of experience do you have to have? And he's like, dude, I have like 2,000 back flying angle jumps. Not exaggerating, because he actually has that many jumps. And he's like, when you have this type of experience, this is when you can follow a tandem angle flying, because it's a serious thing. You can crash into the person and seriously hurt them. You're going incredible speeds. And I was like, oh. And I was like, okay, wait. He said 2,000 jumps? I'm like, this dude barely logs his jumps. How does he know he has 2,000 jumps? Angle flying on the back. And then I thought, wait, wouldn't it be cool if when I have his amount of jumps, I would be able to tell people exactly how many jumps I have in each type of, like, each thing. How many jumps on this canopy, on this type of flight, blah, blah, blah. I would love to have that. So this was even before I was skydiving. And I thought, I need to find a logbook that is going to be able to tell me how many jumps I have. Because prior to that, I was just thinking about writing down the jumps on a normal paper logbook like everybody else does. And eventually I was like, yeah, wait, why don't we do that? Let's find a logbook app. And I found a logbook app on the App Store. It was free and it was old. Michael Caine was the programmer. If any of you guys know who Michael Caine is, tell him he's awesome and he made an awesome app, but it stopped working on my new iPhone, whatever, I don't know, the 15, I think it's the number. It stopped working. The app doesn't work. You can open it, you can scroll through the jumps, but you can't add jumps, you can't edit jumps, you can see the jump. It's annoying. So it actually forced me to learn how to work with Excel, which was pretty cool, because now I have all my logbook on Excel, and I love that. And no, I didn't have to rewrite all of my 4,500 jumps. Michael Caine made it so that you could export the CSV file. So if you're looking for a logbook app, unfortunately, you can't use the one that I used for 4,500 jumps, even though I almost cried when I deleted the app from my phone and just started using the Excel, because he doesn't make it anymore. But what you can do is, if you want to use the app, you can buy an app, and there's some apps that I've been contacted about that are like a social media for skydivers, and they have apps included, and they have a whole bunch of things. You can sell it in one place, basically. So I don't know. Go check it out. I don't remember the names, but they're on like App Store and everything. You can use that. Or if you want to go the old school way, or actually the old new school way, or the new old school way, whatever you want to put it, you can do an Excel sheet. All you need to do is create different rows and columns. So each row is going to be a jump, and each column is going to have various different categories. So jump number, it's just like a sequential column. Date, again, you edit it yourself. Here's the thing, drop zone. You put the name of the drop zone. I even put the ICAO, like International Commission of Aviation. I don't know what it means. The ICAO code of the airfield. So LPEV means, L means Europe, P means Portugal, EV means Evora. That's the airfield I jumped the most, and there's a few more in here too if you scroll enough, like Arizona. I don't know the code of the Arizona. If you know the code of the Arizona and the Colorado ones, let me know in the comments. Aircraft. This is my mistake, my first mistake. Now, the app suggested Caravan, Twin Otter, whatever. If I were doing this today, I would put the license plate number or the registration number, whatever, of the aircraft. So here says Grand Caravan. I've jumped multiple different Grand Caravans in multiple different drop zones. Even my drop zone owns 2 different caravans. I would love to know how many jumps I have on the oldest caravan our drop zone owns, which is Delta Foxtrot Echo Delta Yankee. I don't know. And it's one of the dearest pieces of aircraft that exists in the world, for me at least, is that aircraft. I would love to know how many jumps I have on that one. And I don't. Why? Because I put Grand Caravan. I don't even know if this Grand Caravan means it's a normal caravan, if it's a upgraded engine caravan. Actually, I do know. If it says just caravan, it's a normal caravan. Grand Caravan means C208 Bravo. And if it's super van, I mean it's a Honeywell engine caravan. But regardless, still, I would love to know on each license registration, because I've jumped many different caravans that are Grand Caravans, like 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know. So I would love to know which is which. Bummer, unfortunate. Moving on, gear. Now gear, another mistake that I made was I would put the canopy only, because I thought, well, first of all, I changed my canopies a lot, and the way Michael Caine set up the app, even though it's gorgeous for day-to-day jumpers, it's not so efficient for supers because we change canopies a lot. So he basically had rig and then gear, and then you can like add components to each part of your gear. You can add a rig, you can add a reserve, whatever. I would love to know the jumps that I have on my containers, and I don't. I kind of know on some because the Cypress counts the jump on the container, and the Cypress is like physically attached to the container. There's no way of removing it without actually disassembling the whole thing. So I kind of know more or less, but still, it's annoying because I know exactly how many jumps my canopies have done on each line set, each everything. And I even have little code numbers for the type of canopy it is. If it's a high performance canopy, a wingsuit canopy, if it's a katana level canopy, like the tier list that I made the video for you guys, I kind of have it divided by that. And of course, tandems have 0 because I want them to show up in the beginning. Like the mutant, for instance, it's super important for my own experience level, let's say, to know how many jumps I have on the mutant. So I need to create a whole nother thing for the mutant. You see the M. Now, jump type. There's a thing. You can choose whatever jump types I've done. I've actually gone into a lot of detail in my jump types, so much more detail than I would have wanted. It's got a lot of detail. It's got like how many jumps I have, like doing USPA category, F, G1, G2, G3, and H coaching. How many camera flying jumps, how many camera flying on belly. Like camera flying is only camera flying tandems, tandems only tandems. And then I have camera flying for big weight groups. I have wingsuit is another mistake that I made. I just put wingsuit and then I put BFS means Barracuda Freestyle, and then there's B4 means Barracuda 4. It's a piece of gear, and I have 4 different types of wingsuit jumps that I do, and I need to choose based on what suit I'm using. It doesn't make any sense, because if I'm doing like a wingsuit rodeo, where someone's rodeoing in on me, and it's with one of the suits, I need to choose which suit it is, and not that's a rodeo. Ridiculous. Again, mistakes that I made. Just don't make them. Moving on. Exit altitude and deployment altitude, that's pretty simple. Delay, here's the thing why the app is better than the Excel. Delay you actually have to calculate yourself, and if you have a good logbook, like the logbook we give out at Skydiving Portugal, it already has preset delays for the type of jump that you're doing and the height that you're doing and the amount of free fall you actually fall. So that's pretty good. So what I do is I just copy from previous jumps, the free fall time, like I know the Barracuda freestyle is like 130 seconds. It's sometimes a little less when I'm with a student, but it's much more when I'm alone with my big suit, so I just, hopefully it averages out. And then cutaway, yes or no. And then, of course, notes. Some of them I don't put any notes, some of them do. Oh, one more thing about the jump type. If you're doing a lot of hop and pops, I put like hop and pop distance means any hop and pop. If I'm doing a distance run in a competition, or if I'm just hop and popping in my home to test a new thing out, I just put hop and pop distance. What I would have loved to do is put a hop and pop distance for normal hop and pops, and hop and pop drag distance for the drag distance hop and pops that I do. And then speed for speed, zone accuracy for zone ac. That way I would even know, and freestyle for freestyle, of course, I would kind of know how many jumps I have total in the pond. That would be pretty cool. I don't know that. And then what you have to do is you select the whole thing, everything, and you create a jump skydiving logbook like average. You can know how many jumps you have on each drop zone, on each gear, aircraft, whatever. Everything you get to know, which is pretty sweet. Now about base jumping logbooks. There's also a lot of things that you can do. And Michael Caine actually did a similar app for base jumping. Cost me 99 cents, and I bought it, and now it doesn't work anymore. So where's my 99 cents, Michael? I'm going to find you, and I'm gonna torture. No, I'm not gonna do anything. Yeah, but here's the thing. Yeah, how many base jumps you have? I put the jump number, the date, the year, so that I know how many jumps I have per year. That's also pretty cool. I put the letter of the object, so building, antenna, span, earth, or other. I put the actual name of the object, height to impact, delay, what method, so if it was rollover, static line, stowed, tarred over, handheld, whatever. Then the type of jump it was, if it's low stuff, if it's wingsuit, if it's terminal, subterminal, tracking, whatever. I put the openings, so if I had on heading 90 left, 90 right, or 180, some people even go into the 45 degrees. I just put like 90 on heading or 180, and I put if it's 90 left or 90 right. You can actually average out and see you have many more 90s to one side than the other. It can tell you a little bit about your decision making, or maybe about your pack job, yeah, but if you're packing okay, it can tell you about your decision making. I know that I would much rather jump crosswind from left to right if I'm doing handheld than from right to left. And if it's enough of a wind, if the wind is enough to affect you when you're jumping, to the point where it's going to push the pilot chute into your face, which is my fear when doing low handheld jumps and going and throwing. My fear would be, right to left, when the wind get pushed, the pilot chute can hit my face and get caught on any little thing on my helmet, even though my helmet's pretty clear, pretty smooth. So I tend to accept much more jumps with wind from left to right, and so I've had a lot more on off headings to the left, because it's what I'm much more allowing of that. And should I do it? No, I should just go static line. But being an idiot always helps, and whatever. Then what harness and canopy I use, this is because I did the logbook much earlier, so now I'm smart enough to actually know to write both pieces of gear. What pilot chute did I use, and what brake setting I used, what slider I used, and then a little something about the jump, a little description of the jump. So yeah, guys, I'm sorry for this extremely long video. It's only long because of the stupid logbook part. But hopefully you learned something from this video. If you did, remember to like, comment, send to your friends, and send me money or whatever. I don't know. Follow me on the social medias is the best you can do to help me. And other than that, it's been it for today. Hopefully you guys found this video enjoyable. If you have any questions or complimentary information, you can leave them in the comment section down below. And as always, I will see you guys next time.